A.E. Milford, welcome to Writers in Relationship.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's great. I'm very happy that you said yes, especially after this last story that we worked on together. That was such a pleasure. So maybe just tell people, I don't even like, how did we meet? I have no idea. Now I don't even know.
I'll tell you, I remember. I
You
remember.
tell us
It was
then.
it was it was a story I submitted to the Cobalt Weekly.
Right, right,
And it was, a cold submission just sent through. So that obviously that's very exciting when somebody, when a story right resonates with people that you don't know, with strangers. Um, so I guess the readers or whomever, editorial, I don't know if it was you or other people or a group, um, but I remember you had emailed saying that you would be the one editing. You had some edit suggestions for the story um, before publishing Cobalt Weekly. So that's how it started.
Do you remember what the story was?
Yes, it's a story called "Where They Plant the Trees in Straight Lines,"
Oh
and
my
it.
God, I
Okay,
love.
do you remember?
Yes, I loved it. I loved it. I was blown away.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that was a fun one, and then it was set in sort of the uh, I would say the Mid Atlantic region. Assateague Island in Maryland, Virginia, Southern Delaware, sort of the beach community. That was the setting, and I felt like it had really a sense of place. At least that was my intention. Um, and and then also, if you remember, it was in second person, which is kind of fun
Yes.
and experimental, which normally people don't don't try to do unless, well, I mean, for short stories, but obviously for longer works, usually second person is kind of like little experimental.
Was that a departure for you going into second person?
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say so. Definitely, definitely. Other than maybe some writing exercises,
I'll have to
in
I'll have
school
to
or something.
I'll have to publish a link to that one. It was I
Oh, yeah,
it
that'd
was
be great. Yeah.
it's brilliant. It's I loved it. I
Thank
loved
you.
it. And I loved that it was in second person. Like there was power in that.
Hmm.
Yeah. I'm gonna have to
I've
go.
read some great second person stories. I mean, there's classics if you pick up, American short fiction or classic literary. There's some classics that are in second person. I've read some. It's an interesting voice. Uh, I've read some interesting uh, stories in different literary journals, and I always find what's interesting is they usually use the second person, um, almost sort of in a way where we talk when people talk, colloquially, I guess you would say, you know it's a type of thing that you want to do in the summer. So it almost seems like that, and then they transition into actually saying that it's
Right,
you.
right, right,
And I've
right.
seen that done very well. So when it almost makes the reader more comfortable, because you start reading it and then say, you know, you know, you, but it doesn't seem like it's you, and then it goes into, then you realize that, oh, I'm the one reading it. So
Yeah.
it's confusing. It's confusing even to talk about second person.
For sure, for sure. I just want to go back to what you were talking about in terms
Sure.
of setting, because I think in that story, the setting was a really kind of, it was like I always say when setting is such a big part of a story, it's almost like it's another character.
Hmm.
Um, where are you? And just tell me a little bit about your setting now just as a human.
Sure.
Where are you and how
Sure.
does
I
that
mean,
setting
I'm in
impact you?
Los Angeles, Southern California, um, and I think setting is, it's something that I love as a reader. It's always something I've gravitated towards. I love authors that have a sense of setting, whether that's someone like, Thomas Hardy, of just where it's really, it has this place, even sometimes when it's fictitious, but it's based off of something real. So I've always felt like that was just an important thing. Um, you know, maybe as important as other things. I mean, maybe as important as plot, maybe as important as metaphor. I mean, if you think about Steinbeck or someone with, the Northern California or the coast and I mean, setting is a major, major part of it. But yeah, I'm here in Los Angeles, and I think the setting is, um, it's interesting. I've been here for 20 years, and I'm sure in some ways it's shaped, you know, my thoughts and things. And there's a lot of great Los Angeles writing too. I think Los Angeles is a setting as well, obviously with, um, sort of the noir, like Chandler, that obviously the setting, but then obviously with movies too, with the movies and TV, um, Los Angeles is sort of the setting that around the world, everybody sort of knows it. It's got this, it's got different facets to it, but it's very distinct. I mean, it's as distinct as, Boston or something, if not more so when people think of it. But it's interesting. I will say that the setting, I was thinking about, I didn't realize till recently after being here for 20 years, I was thinking, I think a lot of the setting of Los Angeles, people's view of it um, is sort of shaped by film and television. And because the industry's out here, and I mean, I guess maybe that sounds like an obvious point, but I think I just realized in recent years that like a lot of, maybe moving out here and different things that I've thought about are shaped from being sort of, indoctrinated maybe as a kid, as being 9, 10, 11, 12 years old and watching, movies but everything was set out here. And it sort of made, you start to soak it in and think that this is, and it's really somebody else's creative vision, right? Because it's not
Ra-
really the
Rather than
city.
the actual LA.
Yeah, it's not exactly. It's somebody else's. It's somebody else's creative vision of what they
Yeah.
feel.
The mythological
Yeah,
LA.
exactly, exactly, exactly. Um, which is, New York has that too, to an
Totally.
extent, or all the big cities. Um, but yeah, it's really interesting.
How about just talk a little bit about your relationship with writing and how that started, I'm sure long ago.
Yeah, I mean, I've been writing stories, fiction as long as I can remember. Um, I mean, from being really little, like probably 7 or something. Um, and I think that probably came out of reading. You know, um, I remember being 7 or 8, and I would write these stories about King Arthur, and on on an old computer, one of those old with the old dot matrix printers that have the like the spoked paper, I guess you would call it, on the edges. And I remember I would write these stories and print them out, and I would roll them up into little scrolls and then hide them. So I'd write these stories, print them out, roll them up, put a rubber band around them, and um and hide them. But I think I always, it was always something that I enjoyed in school too. Being in any grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade, all the way, all the way through. It's always something. Like I said, probably came from reading. I
And
assume.
did you always want to be a writer? Like when you were thinking, people would ask you, what did you want to be when you grew up? Like, is that what you thought?
I would say to an extent, yes. Yes, it was always something that I also am a musician and studied music and played music for many years. I think that maybe took the forefront for a long time too. Um, but it's similar. I mean, songwriting, and I mean it's really the same thing. It's not just similar; it's kind of the same thing. I mean, somebody writing lyrics is writing a form of poetry, or it actually is writing poetry, and writing lyrics and putting music to it. I mean, it's it's storytelling. It's the same. It's the same exact thing. So there's um, same part of the brain, I suppose.
Do you remember the first thing that you actually ever published?
Yes, yes, yes. Um, Yes, I wrote a story that was published in the Schuylkill Valley Journal, a short story called Canon, and it's a sense of place. It was set in Delaware, where I'm from, and it had a sense of place. Um, the fun thing about that was, and this is one of these things I had tried to get stuff published and didn't, but I wrote that story, I think, let's just say in college, and then I went and revised it, something like 10 years later after college, and then submitted it to Schuylkill Valley Journal. And then I think I didn't hear back from them for like several years. Like it was one of those things where it came out of the blue, 2.5 years after submitting it. So it's just that's kind of fun, but it's very exciting, obviously. Um, but yeah, that was the first thing. But I mean, if you think about that, it's technically like 12 years or something from the time it was written to being published.
That's amazing. And that was how long ago?
I would say probably about 10 years ago from now,
Yeah.
um, give or take. But yeah, it's fun. I mean, that's fun when you get these things out of the blue, when you send something somewhere and you just don't know, and it could be years, 6 months. But in some ways, I would say I kind of like that, because in this day and age where everything's so fast with technology, everything you want is being immediate. Everybody, right? People want an answer to their email in 30 seconds, and everything's supposed to be absolutely immediate. So I think it's kind of nice that sort of, if you think about it, that you get, sort of, if you're doing a cold submission to a journal, they'll say, we'll respond within 8 months. And it's like, there aren't many other things right now where, where you have to wait that long.
What's one relationship that you would say is alive for you right now, and how does that impact your writing?
I think obviously, relationship with my family. So I'd say, relationship with my wife, my daughter. I think that, having school age children, that relationship becomes, sort of the center of your life, at least for, most, that part of your life. Um, so I think that's a major thing, a major relationship. And then, so those human relationships, and, but then there's also, you know, relationships with, different things, nature, a relationship with music, a relationship with art. Um, but family is definitely a key one. Um, and it's universal. I mean, for most people, those human relationships are sort of the key. The key ones are in the forefront of daily life.
How does your relationship with nature show up in your work? That's interesting to me.
It does. I mean, it's part of setting, kind of. But we're talking about setting. I think what nature is. I think it's extremely important. I mean, I think it's imagery, um, and it's, gives a sense of being somewhere, and the uniqueness of that setting. I mean, I think nature is one of the most important things for the human experience. I mean, I really do. I think that it's as important as, anything else. It's because it's a relationship with our environment, right? I mean, that's what it truly is. Is we're human beings, we're living things, we're mammals, we're in an environment, we're on Earth. So I mean, it's the relationship with water, the ocean, or rivers, or trees, or, I mean, it's flowers, or, it's our environment. So yeah, I've always found nature, and I've always gravitated towards writers that write about nature, or, I had read somewhere that, or heard somewhere, I think that, Beethoven was had a really, strong relationship with nature, which is kind of funny. People, I guess if people know
That does
classical
not
music, or
that
they
does
know
not
him.
that does not surprise me one bit.
Yeah, yeah, I get that's what they said. He used to take,
right?
long walks and was just, but he was really into nature. One symphony, I think his sixth symphony is about, is nature. Um, but, so I think there's something that, something just really important about it for the soul.
But you like when you listen to it's so interesting because I've never heard anyone say that, but when you listen to it, you can hear it. You can hear storms.
Yes,
Right?
exactly.
Like it's just it's really
Exactly. It's
interesting.
storms, exactly, all that stuff. And I like painters of nature. If you think somebody like, I mean, obviously the Impressionists, or, you mentioned storms, you think of like Turner or something, but or even the Renaissance painters, when they paint mythology, it was always about nature. So yeah, I think that's a key relationship. It really is. And it's, sometimes it's so good to just sometimes it's good to just walk in the woods, right? Just go on a hike or walk in the woods or sit somewhere,
You know, just sort of bask in it and
yeah,
with it, right?
yeah.
Yeah. Can you tell me about a particular favorite um, relationship in a story that you've written between characters and what was
Hmm.
pleasurable about that to write?
I think most, I would say that a lot of what I write is about relationships, and probably romantic relationships, uh, between characters. I'd have to look at it. It's interesting you asked that. I'm sure if I looked at it, it's probably mostly everything I've written probably has some sort of aspect of a romantic relationship. Um,
What about Martin Dalcourt? I mean, I'm just thinking because that's the story. Like we worked on that story together for Hodgepodge.
yes.
He's
Well, I
very
mean,
interesting, right? Like what's
yeah. That's about his relationship with with multiple, people throughout his experience, and sort of the negative side of these romantic relationships, or the, unrequitedness of them. But I think that's because also, once again, it's kind of a universal thing. I would say for most people, sort of those romantic relationships, um, of love, or are sort of the key things of one's life. I mean, I feel like with music, to go back to music, that's why, 99% of songs are love songs. I mean, it is, and I don't think, and it's funny because I would actually say that over the years, I've always enjoyed songs that aren't love songs. I always think that's, I maybe because it's different, but it's always interesting and they stick out, when there's a song, whether it's a political song, or, a song about angst or something, that is actually not, because 99% of songs are about love, romantic relationships. But I think that it's not, I wouldn't say that that's done, um, I wouldn't be cynical about it. I think that that's probably because that feeling is what makes people want to write music. And, I don't think it's, um, I don't think it's corporations telling people you have to write love songs. I think people do. They write songs because that's the way they feel, and it makes them want to write music. Just like there's a lot of love poetry, or, Shakespeare sonnets or something, right? It is a really, driving energy. So yeah, I think that I think that probably in most of the fiction I've written, it's something about, either, even if it's just two people, and, their relationship with each other, and tension, or or longing. It could even be that. It could be that unrequited, um, sense of longing, that somebody wants to have a relationship and somebody else doesn't, or the end of a relationship, or the beginning of a relationship. Um, but it just has that universal substance.
what was the
That
inspiration for Martin? I just think he's such an interesting character.
it's interesting. It just kind of it came out of I would say some ways the setting. Um, I was sort of thinking of the prompt and the hodgepodge, looking at the painting um, of Sail on Home, and then to me feeling that that was the setting of Cape Cod, and then somehow, I did want to do a character study of someone, and the setting of Cape Cod just brought up all these thoughts of the New England and sort of that, history of literature, and maybe you could even say puritanical, um, New England, Hawthorne, things like that. I mean, there's a little bit. I mean, it's amalgamation probably of a lot of things. It's it's almost like a Ichabod Crane, um, but more. I guess he's more of a cat. I mean, he's not. He's a little bit more. He's not exactly like Ichabod Crane. He's a little bit. He's a troublemaker too. Um, but yeah, it just came out. I mean, yeah, these characters just sort of. I don't know. Who knows where they come from? I guess they're also. I mean, that's what people always say, and I think it's true. Is that don't they say that all characters are actually yourself? Which I think is probably true. You're writing about all, even if you have three people having conversations, like they're all actually the author and expressing different parts. I mean, it's true. It's. I think that's probably, psychologically speaking, it's probably proven.
Yeah, or maybe the unexpressed parts of ourselves, right?
Yeah, exactly,
Right.
exactly,
But
exactly.
like I would say, were you ever a cad in your life?
No, no, but
Right.
it's
But
just,
but there's like the cad within, right? The parts of ourselves that could be that person, maybe.
yeah, exactly. It's like yeah, it's interesting, and sometimes I guess characters do you take little pieces of people as well, though, and sometimes those are just little details, right? And nobody would ever know really, but there's just something that pops in your head that maybe you have a friend that, just making up an example, but you have a friend who always buys new shoes, and it's like, so somehow you have a character and that detail just comes in there, and you realize that you're talking about this person. you know he went and bought 5 pairs of shoes, and you realize that, oh, it was because your friend, 5 days ago did that. It's like a dream, right? Isn't that right? Dreams, you look at dreams and you say, okay, there's these 10 things that are all mashed up that, happened over the last month. It's like stories can sometimes be like that.
Yeah. Um, what advice would you give to other writers with regards to their own sort of the connection between their relationships and their writing?
That's interesting. Um, Advice. I mean, I guess I would say just think about, I would say think in what relationships in the past. I mean, obviously, the past is where we mine a lot of things for writing, where writers, you know, in your memory, in your past, and things that made you decide. I feel like looking back and seeing what things are still sticking out, if that makes sense. Like what things won't go away, what things, you haven't forgotten, or that, maybe there's some image. Um, and sometimes it's setting too. Um, but if there's something that it's been 10, 15, 20 years, and you keep thinking about that time you were sitting on a bench, and a duck walked by or whatever, I don't know, that it's like, then there's something about that needs to be. And I have those moments, and I think some of the stories I've written, that's exactly what they are. There's like some little moment that won't go away, out of all the moments, in life, there'll be like, there's these little things that stick out. And they don't necessarily, it doesn't mean they're bad, or like it doesn't mean that it's some big event. Um, Sometimes they're really small, right? And maybe sometimes that's more fun and more intriguing. Um, I keep referencing writers here, but um, I think a lot of good writers have done that. Have taken that sort of what seems uneventful and and explore that uneventful moment. So I think that probably my advice would be to say, with maybe somebody's into meditating or something, and you look back and think, I always think about that one time that I was on a boat when I was 12, or because then you can get into, I guess this would be another advice, I feel like, at least for me, then you can get into also that sense memory stuff quicker, because there's something, it's like listening to a song you remember, right? It takes you right back there, like Proust with the Madeline or whatever. I mean, that's really, and then it's cool because then it's like you're going back in time too. I feel like your brain, your soul, you actually like kind of are going back in time.
Yeah. Tell us what are you working on right now?
I'm working on a novel. Working on a novel. Uh, so I'm pretty excited about that, and it's definitely something with a sense of place, which is very important, and a sense of history too. Because I think that's another relationship I would say that I think relationship with history. I've always loved history, and probably a lot of writers do. And having a relationship with history, almost like you're an archaeologist or something, is a really important relationship. And I don't know, history sort of puts things in perspective for me. And I like to write about it. I like to write about it, maybe just because it brings things full circle. Um, so there's a lot of history in the novel, and even though it's fiction, um, I've always liked historical fiction. It's not historical fiction, but I've always liked historical fiction. Um, but I've also just liked that sort of looking back. I mean, maybe it's just it's being a romantic, and I think a lot of creative artists are like that. And I don't know. I've always wondered what that's about too. Not to go off on a tangent, but that idea of like wanting to have lived in a different time period or something. And I feel like I know from conversations, I'm sure a lot of writers out there are like, yes, and it doesn't even have to be, and it's sort of the just rose-colored glasses. I mean, looking back and that things weren't actually better then. It's like obviously in the medieval ages, or it wasn't actually good, but there's sort of that romanticism, like always wanting to be like, I wish I lived in the 1950s, or and you see that nowadays. It's funny because you do see that now. If you're looking on social media or something, YouTube, and you're looking at like 80s songs, and you can tell there'll be people that are like, I'm 20 and you know, I should have been born and, or I should have been alive in 1983. I would have, and they're serious. And I know they're serious because I used to feel that way about like the 50s. I would think if I had been around when, you know, Elvis, rock and roll and all that, and, that, but it's like they're kids, and there's people that feel that way. And it's just looking back, you know, watching some movie from 1984 that's romanticizing the era and listening to the music and thinking everything would have been better back then. It's like,
Well, and
and
that's
I'm gonna do, yeah,
you were right. Martin Dowcourt is a
I would, yes,
character that has the romanticism.
yes,
You're writing about a character
yes,
who has the romanticism.
yes. That is, you're 100% correct. See, now this is like, yeah, this is like bringing stuff to the surface. That's exactly right. So I am like that, him, in that sense. That is. And he's set, interestingly enough, he's not even set in contemporary. He's set, the story's set in the 1960s. So he's supposed to be something in the 1960s that's romanticized about the Victorian era. Um, but you come across these characters. Sometimes if you do read, I can't think of an exact example, but authors will, like if you're, let's just say you're reading something from the turn of the 20th century. Sometimes you'll run across these characters where they'll describe the characters as saying he wished he lived in the 1700s. So I do think that that's always been this sort of some sort of personality um, trait to some people, that if they were, I mean, quite frankly, I'm going to go to art. I'm going to make another reference. Art, the, there was all the romantic, I mean, or Beethoven, of all the romantic painters, right? And they were in the 1800s, and they were obsessed with the idea that, oh, the chivalry of the medieval times, that was what they were looking back, thinking this was, everything was great then, and then, drawing, painting pictures of Robin Hood, and saying this was, if we could only be found back then. So it's always something. Not everybody's like that. I don't know if I envy people that aren't like that or not. I mean, I know some people that are just sort of living the present, and they're like, they have no interest. They're like, why would I want to exist in the 1920s? Why would I want to, watch old black and white movies? Some people just aren't. Some people are just in the present, and maybe, I don't know. I don't know if it'd be good to be like that or not, but I've always liked old things.
Very cool. So if if people want to check out your work, where are some places? And I'll
I,
include links, but where can people find your work online now?
I would say to check out the new issue of Hodgepodge. Um, its issue is 4.1, I believe, as we're calling it. But I would check that out. I think that's the best thing, and then you can see all the um, all the other great writing, and all the great art, um, and then also, you can, I have A.E. Milford, website, and you can Google around. I'm sure Gail may link to some stories, um, but yeah, definitely check out the new issue of Hodgepodge. Have to do that plug.
And I'll put a link to your website in there. And on your website, you've got links to like the
Yes,
Cole story and other stories are
yes,
all.
yes, yes. Exactly, exactly,
Well, thank you so
exactly.
much.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's been great. I've learned things.
It's
There's been
funny,
a lot of references
like
too. We have to put
yeah, yeah,
footnotes
yeah,
to all the references. Say, what is
totally.
this guy talking about? He's got like
But
he
setting,
mentioned like 10
this
authors.
whole thing of setting, like that just kept coming back, and that's really
Yeah.
interesting because I always find setting a very strong part of any story that you write. So it's interesting to
Well, thank you.
reflect on that, and it's one of the
Oh,
things
thank you. I appreciate it.
I love that about your work a lot. Yeah.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
All right. Good luck and
Well,
thanks.
thank you very much.